Dude, I just remember looking at the pocket of my knee and feeling in there, and there was no kneecap. And I was like, oh my gosh, man, I think I ruptured my patellar tendon. And you were like, dude, I think you're right.
I think you self-diagnosed well there, Keenan. Fortunately, I was hoping you were wrong. I really was. I was like, no way, he's on vacation. Like, no, this isn't happening. No. Crazy part, right? You can feel like right in between your femur and your tibia. Which right now, if you try and do that, like you have a big fat patellar tendon and a kneecap there, so you can't. And I was like, we were both like, oh, yeah, it's gone. And when someone comes in, heals you, and gives you the confidence, you're like, oh my god. Like, talk about being grateful for something or for someone. So that's what like I really fell in love with as an athletic trainer.
All right, guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Hart Hustle Podcast. I'm incredibly excited because I've got my buddy Hunter with me today. Now, Hunter absolutely exemplifies what the heart and hustle about life is really about. And on this podcast, we talk about the heart and hustle and everything that's necessary for success in life and business. And Hunter is going to be leading us through this journey together because me and you met in Hawaii. You have always inspired me because you've always been somebody who's been an incredible high achiever in my mindset. So, Hunter, what does being a high achiever mean to you?
Well, Keenan, thank you, first of all. I mean, this is such a reciprocal relationship. Like, you've inspired me in so many different ways in my life. And it's crazy that, just a quick sidebar, I believe it's Malia's birthday today.
Today, we were recording on Malia's birthday. So happy birthday to baby girl. Happy birthday to you.
I've never met without her. So shout out to Malia. Happy birthday. But like when I first met you, it's like exactly what you are and where you've become. It's just positivity, lifting other people up around you. And that's something I've always like right off the rip took from you as a person, and, you know, try and instill it in my own life. But I appreciate that, you know, we kind of do the same thing for each other. And, yeah, I mean, to actually answer your question, to me, I've always been looking for, you know, how am I going to get the most out of life, whether it's my family, my relationships, my job. You know, for a long time before I met my wife and had a child, like, you know, work was everything, right? Like, grind school, get good grades. That's how I was raised, right? Like, you score well in your tests, and then you get a good job, and then you have a good life. And, you know, we'll definitely get into like that has so much changed right around that like old school thought, but that's how I was raised. That's how I grind. That's like all I know. So that's just kind of how I've gone through life, and it's brought me to some really awesome places. It brought me to Hawaii. It brought me back home. But it's just trying to get the most out of every day, trying to get the most out of every relationship and every situation, and then building on that, right? Like, okay, we hit this today. What are we going to do tomorrow? How are we going to take that next step? So
where did that chip on your shoulder kind of come from? Because literally you've been one of the hardest working people that I've ever met. Like, one of the things I remember about you, especially when we lived in Hawaii, was you'd be up before the sun came up. You'd be getting your workouts in. You'd be going to school all day, getting your master's. You'd be working your job as an athletic trainer. You go play basketball afterwards. You start investing into the relationship with your girl. It's like, where do you get all the time from? And where does that motivation, that drive come from for you?
Well, I appreciate that. I do. I really do. First of all, shout out to my mama, because the energy comes from her. If you ever met my mom, she's like, never stops. She's literally up at 5, working out, going to work, working a double, still making dinner for the family, still cleaning up everything. House is immaculate before she goes to bed. So shout out to mama for the energy. Because, yeah, my wife is like, I don't know how you do it. But it's just, it's always been an innate energy for me. But it's I like too many things, man. I just, you know, I can't say no. You know, I tend to be a little bit of a yes man. So it's like that chip on my shoulder is like, all right, like, yeah, go grind, go work, go, you know, further your education, go get your master's. But it's like, you got to enjoy life. You know, I could come home exhausted, but like, I have too many hobbies, right? Like, I love basketball. I love to bow hunt. I love jiu-jitsu. I have way too many hobbies that, for me, that's what recharges me as a person, you know, like that's that extroverted, I need to be out with people doing things, that's what recharges me at the end of the day. So when I check all these boxes and I come home, it's like, yes, like I crushed today, and it's like, let's do it again tomorrow. Um, I don't. It's hard to say like what truly inspired all of it to come together. You know, like where'd the actual chip on my shoulder come from? Um, but I attribute it to my mom more than anything, dude.
Dude, there's a really interesting study out there that talks about, I think it's like I'm going to completely butcher this, but there was a national pediatric study that was done that said that mothers who are more active have a direct impact on their children and their levels of activity throughout life. So if your mom is super active and you grow up as a little child watching her go to the gym, do all these different things, you're more likely to be that person. And the exact opposite is true. If your mom sits around all day, if they just hang out, if they just kick it, you're more likely to actually kind of embody and personify what you've seen as a child. So that's really interesting. And I saw that yesterday on Instagram, and I think it's a perfect kind of like segue into where that comes from.
And I think like even a step further, like what your mom does while she's carrying you, right? While you're in a little embryo, like growing inside, like a lot of that I think crosses over. And but my mom was like jogging every day up to like 10 miles till she was 8 months pregnant with me. So like her whole pregnancy was just like, yeah, I'm still going to teach aerobics. I'm still going to do this, that, and the other. So it kind of makes sense, you know, like break it all down. So I totally believe it.
Yeah, man. So one of my questions for you is, we met on Hawaii because of the relationship you had with Malia, right? You guys are friends, and you guys are both in the athletic training program. So, one thing that I want you to shed a little light on was, why was athletic training something that you were so passionate about? Because when I was growing up, I never had good athletic trainers. They were always just the guy who was hanging out in the med room who would tape us up and stuff like that. But hearing the perspective of why fitness, and more importantly, the approach to athletic training and supporting athletes, is so interesting to me. So why don't you dive a little bit into why you became an athletic trainer with all the choices that you had out there in the world?
Absolutely. It's kind of funny because I stumbled into it more so than anything. Um, it was more like I knew I wanted to be a physical therapist. That's like I've always gravitated towards sciences my whole life. Like math always came super easy. Any science came, chemistry, biology. And then I started to like realize I love anatomy. Like for some reason, I'm like really intrigued in anatomy. So that's where like from my own injuries as as a high school athlete, you go to PT, you're like, oh, what they do is kind of cool. Like they're problem solving, they're like kind of high level problem solving, figuring out what injuries are going on, how can I heal this person, get them back, and if not just back, but like better than before, right? Because an injury happened for whatever reason. So let's fix those underlying issues and get you back better than ever. So it was more so, okay, what are good at physical therapy programs? And then this is how naive I was at the time. They're like, no, that's like a grad school. You have to pick an undergrad to get to PT school. And I was like, okay, well, what do I do? They're like,
Dude, isn't that so interesting that like when we go through school, we're not really told what to do until we actually get there. And they're like, dude, you actually have to go through a graduate program in order to become that individual.
7 years of school. Are you sure you want to do this? I'm like, yeah, I get deal. I'm done. Let's do it. It's so funny. But yeah, I think it was psychology, biology, exercise science, and athletic training. And like the first two, I was like, meh. So I was like, exercise science or athletic training, what's the difference? And the big thing that stood out to me was during your athletic training, like undergrad major, you're going to get clinical rotations, right? You're going to be working with these collegiate athletes. Every semester you get a different team. And I'm like, sold, right? Like trial by fire, like learn by doing, right? I consider myself a good student. I get good grades. I like studying. Like I consider myself a student by nature, but you don't learn better than actually doing things. So I was like, sign me up for that. And it's funny because I didn't even know what an athletic trainer was at that time still, because I never had one. I went through all of my high school athletics without an athletic trainer.
Yeah.
Goes to show how behind the ball the profession was for so long. Now it's like every high school and middle school and like AAU team has an athletic trainer. So I went down that route knowing, I could always switch or I could go, and I fell in love, man. It's like, you really dig into anatomy, then you dig into like the problem solving right off the bat. Like sophomore year, they have you doing upper and lower extremity evaluations where it's like, okay, here is the shoulder girdle. Here's the bones, ligaments, tendons, anatomy, nerves. Here's all the things that can possibly go wrong. And then these are the things you have to do, right? You start with like this big funnel and you just slowly work your way down to, okay, you have like 1, 2, or 3 differential diagnoses, and you test these theories, and you know what's going on, and then you heal that athlete. So it's it's a puzzle, and that's what I've always loved about the medical fields and human anatomy. It's like, let's figure out this puzzle and help this. Because like, if you're not medically like in tune, or know anything about you feel helpless, right? You get an injury, you're like, what do I do? And when someone comes in, heals you, and gives you the confidence, you're like, oh my god! Like, talk about being grateful for something or for someone. So that's what like I really fell in love with as an athletic trainer.
I mean, you play a critical role in an athlete's journey, and I'm going to talk about a little bit of a story. So there was one fateful Monday that I was playing a pickup basketball game with Hunter, and so let me tell you a little bit more about the story. So on the Sunday previous to our little adventure, it was my 29th birthday. So I'm spending my 29th birthday in Hawaii. We're all hanging out. We're drinking a couple of mimosas, kicking it. Everybody comes up to me and says, hey man, you should play in a pickup basketball game with us. The next Monday I show up, I've got a pair of high top khaki Air Force Ones on. I'm running up and down the court. We're having a good time. I'm watching Hunter ball out, play point guard, crossing everybody up.
Too, that's the best part.
And then halftime comes. We go back out onto the court. One of the first plays of the entire session was a lazy pass over the middle of the key. I tip it out. I feel like LeBron James. I'm going down the middle. Nobody's around me. I'm on a breakaway. I try and elevate off my left foot, and I feel like somebody punches me in the back of my knee. I hit the ground, don't know what's going on. Look down at my knee, and my patellar tendon is absolutely ruptured. Who's the first person who comes over to me? Athletic trainer Hunter, one of my homies. And he's like, hey man, what happened? And I'm like, dude, my knee is gone. Why don't you walk us through your kind of experience in that whole event?
So yeah, no, I remember that like it was yesterday. I'm kind of glad you brought it up, because if you didn't, I was going
Yeah.
to. No, that's, I mean, right off the bat, right? Like, non-contact injury, right? No one's around you. I didn't see you come down funny. So like, non-contact, yeah, it could be an ACL, could be patellar tendon, could be hammy. Like, things are going through, and I like look down, your leg is straight. You're like, I can't move my leg. I can't bend it. And your quad is just like spazzing like crazy. I don't know if you remember that. Like, it was trembling. And I was like, all right, like try and squeeze your quad. And you're like, right off the bat, I'm like, okay, so ruptured patellar tendon, quad tendon, depending on where, the site. So I'm like, okay. And I'm like, maybe it's partial, right? Like, so I'm like, I don't know if you're, I was like really digging. I was like, Keenan, like, I need you. I know it hurts. Like, I need you to like really, and you're like,
dude, I just remember looking at the pocket of my knee and feeling in there, and there was no kneecap. And I was like, oh my gosh, man, I think I ruptured my patellar tendon. And you were like, dude, I think you're right.
I think you self-diagnosed well there, Keenan. Fortunately, I was hoping you were wrong. I really was. I was like, no way, he's on vacation. Like, no, this isn't happening. No. But the crazy part, right? You can feel like right in between your femur and your tibia. Which right now, if you try and do that, like you have a big fat patellar tendon and a kneecap there, so you can't. And I was like, we were both like, oh yeah, it's gone. And I mean, I'm sure you remember Malia got you to the hospital. We came and hung out with you till you were in there, till like midnight?
Yeah, you guys brought me Taco Bell and everything like that. You guys were the real homies, showed up, waited in the waiting room and everything like that, man. It was a traumatic experience, but I was so glad that I was around people who knew exactly what was going on and the process as well, because you hit me up the next morning or even that night and you were like, hey man, listen, I know some surgeons here. We can get you in for surgery right away. We just have to figure out what the plan of action is. Unfortunately, I ended up having to fly back to Las Vegas with my knee in an immobilization sleeve. And I'm sitting there over the 5-hour flight back to Vegas. And I'm just thinking about how miserable my life is going to be. And so I landed back in Vegas, had surgery the next day, man, and started that 1.5-year journey realistically to kind of recover. And it was crazy because my entire knee or my entire leg atrophied out and the entire rehab process was terrible. But here was something that was really interesting. When I went through the process of rehab, I talked to my physical therapist and he was like, hey, the objective here is to get you back to 75% of what you used to be able to do. And I remember talking to Malia about that. And she was like, no, you're not going to be back to 75%. You're going to be 100% good again, but it's going to be a real bitch. We're going to have to work. And she was the person who implemented my recovery process, all the workouts, all the other things that I had to do. And I totally now understand if I did not have an athletic trainer in my corner who would have given me the exercises on how I could rehab, there's no way I would have been able to, be squatting, running, sprinting, jumping, doing plyometrics again. And it's just
And,
crazy to think about. The athletic training degree in itself was so much more than what my physical therapist was able to give me, because it was
mhm.
so much more based on function and how I could actually like get back to being myself.
And it's just having someone to be that deep of an advocate for you, right? Like, this is your homie, right? This is your girl. Like, she wants nothing but the best for you. Whereas, physical therapists, like, they are bound to their own constraints, right? They have to, they have to hit their certain amount of patients per day, which means they can only see a patient so many times a day. And insurance only allots them to see you 48 times within this calendar year because of, it's like, so they're bound to their own constraints, which stinks. But like, how lucky to have someone so knowledgeable, so adept to, and so much of an advocate for your well-being, right? She's like, no, we're gonna get you to like 120%. Screw 75, screw 100. Like, we're getting you. You're gonna be better than you've ever been. And it's just, you got to have that mentality of getting beyond what that, like, what's normal, right? Like, everything's compared to, oh, this is normal, and it's like, well, normal isn't good enough. Like, normal definitely isn't good enough for me. I know it's not good enough for you. Like, we want to be top 1%, right, of everything, no matter what we're doing. We want to be like up there. So normal isn't going to cut it. Like, 75% is not going to cut it. So it's incredible that you have an athletic trainer now in your corner, grinding with you every day.
But it
And
really
you
was
are.
like that word that you used there, that advocate, was something that I think is really important to recognize, because that advocacy for somebody's recovery really is so much more important. And that's one of the things that I think healthcare loses today, because like
Yeah.
you said, the objective is to get people back to normal. But if you
Yeah.
look at what normal is today, especially in the United States, it's people who have probably less than $1,000 in the bank account. It's somebody
Mm-hmm.
who is obese and somebody who is likely to get divorced as well. And that is not a good definition of what I want from normal. And so I want to kind of lean into that a little bit with you. You're wearing a
Yeah.
shirt today that says Ultimate Pursuit. So when you talk about the ultimate pursuit of being the best version of yourself, why is being the best version of yourself and tapping out your full potential something that you lean into so heavy? And I think that's like a perfect sentence for Hunter.
I appreciate that. Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, shout out to Ultimate Pursuit, Louis Marone. I mean, one of my good buddies. That's his whole mantra. I mean, you literally look up Ultimate Pursuit on Instagram and just scroll through his feed, just read his captions, and like every caption is like a really sobering thought of like, so many people just go through life, walking in their crop circle, doing their normal average thing. It's like, no, like, be on your ultimate pursuit of whatever it is in life. If you want to be the biggest badass, if you want to be, the craziest snowboarder, if you want to bake the best loaf of bread, like, whatever it is that you're doing, like, there's an ultimate pursuit, like an end game to this. So just don't settle, and don't be okay with like mediocrity, or don't be okay with what's normal. And I think so many people fall into that. And you just see the bar almost getting, like, in America, you see that bar of like what normal used to be. It just kind of like lowers and lowers and lowers. I mean, what, 80% of people are overweight or obese now. Over 90% have a metabolic disease. 90% of Americans have some form of metabolic disease. Like, that is crazy.
Why
You
don't you
know,
why don't you break that down a little bit for us, Hunter? Talk about this metabolic disease, like, so the audience and everybody knows exactly what you're talking about.
yeah. So it's considered, right, if you have some form of like insulin resistance, right, or like they call it metabolic disorder, where when you eat food, you're not processing it the way that you should be, essentially, right? Because you have some sort of insulin resistance, which means now your body has to output more insulin to fight the sugar that you're taking in. Whether it's good sugar, bad sugar, doesn't matter. People will develop this insulin resistance, and it has a cascade of effects on the rest of the body. So, and that's what ultimately leads to, right, like type 2 diabetes, overweight, obesity, dementia, right? We're seeing all of this research come out on not only is this insulin resistance harming like your physical body, but it's harming your brain. And like, all of Alzheimer's and dementia is it has this really, really strong link to insulin resistance and having this metabolic disease. And it's like ravaging the entire nation, more so than other nations. You look at Europeans, and you look at Asian, like people in like different Asian countries, it's so different. And it's like being okay, right? Like it's totally okay. I think I posted something that you commented on Instagram the other day, and
This is going to
it
be
was
great. I'm really excited for this part of the conversation.
it blew my mind that I think it was the USDA had published like literature saying it's okay to, I forget the number, if
It
you
was like
remember,
91% of high processed foods is considered healthy today.
ultra processed. So they're
Ultra.
saying yes. So right there's a gradient of processed foods, and like ultra processed is obviously the worst of them. And the USDA was like, hey, we created this 7-day diet, and 91% of it is ultra processed, and it's okay and it's healthy. So now you have the USDA advocating for ultra processed food consumption, which follow the money, right? Who are the lobbyists for that, right? Oh, it's Kellogg, it's General Mills, it's all these big processed food, it's Hershey, it's all these big processed food companies that like they're trying to make more money, so let's get America to back us. And it's crazy how that's where this mediocrity comes from, right? To like close that loop, that's where we're at. We have these big companies just wanting to make more money, so they're telling us it's okay to eat not good food and not treat our bodies well, and well, that's why we're significantly overweight and have metabolic disease.
Yeah, it's a crazy process because I remember growing up with us, we always had the food pyramid, right? And we were
Mm-hmm.
shown like the levels of our pyramid and the different levels of our diet and the things that we should be consuming. And it seems like that food pyramid is becoming more and more processed. But then if you want to kind of take a bigger perspective at what's really going on, you think about the processed foods that we're eating, the
Mm-hmm.
lower levels of energy, the lower levels of testosterone in men today, the lower levels of, I would say, cortisol, not cortisol, but serotonin that people are experiencing. So more people are on antidepressants. It's a cyclical cycle that continues to feed on itself. Let's feed everybody shit. Let's give them medicine that's going to keep them feeling shitty. And then let's cycle them back into the system and we'll continue to profit off of this. One of the things
Negative.
that I thought was really interesting about you was back in the day, 2020, I remember you talking about going on the carnivore diet. And so now the carnivore diet is something that's incredibly popular, but you're one of the first people who was really leaning into this lifestyle. Why did you make that super big change compared to what everybody else was doing?
So yeah, it was like a weird, um, you know, it, the whole space is just this weird evolving, like there's no one true answer for anyone. So I just like started to dig into like why does this work for this person? Why does this work for this person? Why is there not one thing that works for all humans? Like we're all Homo sapiens, we have the same like genetic makeups. Why don't we all react well to one thing? So I think that actual process started probably in like 2016. I like stumbled upon like the ketogenic diet, and I was like, what is this? And you kind of dug into the research, and I went like full in on it, and then I like transitioned out of that and more like paleo-ish, and then I got to Hawaii, and I started digging into this carnivore thing, right? And to me, it's like, how can I make the engine run the best? Because you are what you eat. So I'm just trying to like minimize damage essentially. Like we're as we age, like our bodies get damaged. Like how do I minimize damage? How do I anti-age? Right? How do I and as I went through, I was like, carnivore actually made a lot of sense. Although, like, not 3 years later, like, ask me about carnivore, I have my reservations about it now. But I think it's really good for what it is. And if someone has an autoimmune disorder, or if someone is severely metabolically unhealthy, or has a crazy insulin resistance, I think carnivore is the absolute best way to go, just for jumpstarting your health and like getting you off of those sugar cravings and getting you out of that cyclical cycle you were just talking about. I think it's a really really good application for that. Now, long term, I have my questions on it. Like you see all this research on fiber, and you see like how important it is for your gut health. And I could rabbit hole down that.
Yeah, let's do that. I mean, let's go there.
So like one of the things I was thinking about was I read this book recently called The Second Brain, and it's a pretty like nerdy book. Like I'm pretty well adept in like medical terminology. It was a difficult read for me, but I loved it because the second brain is talking about your gut. and it's called the enteric nervous system. And what they're finding is that the gut is actually what causes the brain to think its thoughts. So we're like, and this ties in perfectly to like everything that you do, and like being intentional with your mindsets. And it's like, sometimes if you're not giving your body the right things and you're not feeding the gut the right things, and your gut is so unhealthy, no matter how hard you work at like controlling and being diligent and your thoughts and your intentions, you already set yourself up for failure, because what's going on in your enteric nervous system is so poor that it's sending the brain the wrong thoughts. So no matter what you do up there, it's actually coming from down below. So that's where, for me, health, like what you feed your body comes before anything. If you're not feeding your body the right things, if your body's not firing the way it should be, it's really hard to do the rest. So that was, in the last 2 years, one of the biggest things I've taken away is really understanding gut health and understanding how it affects the rest of your body, and how you think, and your mindset, your serotonin levels, your cortisol levels. That a lot of that is derived from the gut.
It's so interesting to me because I recently listened to a podcast with Joe Rogan and Gary Brecka, and he was talking about horticulturalists. He was like, if you ever have a plant that is dying and you call a horticulturalist out to your location, the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to look at the soil of the plant. They're not going to look at the leaves that are dying. And it's a really interesting perspective that healthcare in itself, at least my experience, I've grown up in the healthcare space, and I've recognized that healthcare has always been kind of compartmentalized, if you will. People have always thought about your brain health being completely separate from your physical health. And it's interesting that you talk about the connection between mind and gut, because if you're not getting the appropriate chemicals created in your gut system, then you're not going to get the proper chemicals up to your brain, which means that we have a deficiency somewhere in our body, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah. And it's weird how an entire subgroup of like the medical profession called holistic health is its own thing, right? We're essentially, that should be healthcare. All of healthcare should be holistic, right? You go to your physical therapist, they should be asking you, how are you sleeping? Because if you're not sleeping well, then your body's not going to recover. And if your body's not recovering, then you're not going to heal your injury, right? Like, all of this is connected. Every specialist you see should be asking those holistic questions, but it's compartmentalized, and now like an own little nugget of healthcare called holistic health has given birth, because we've gone so far away from it. And I hate to like downplay, like being able to specialize healthcare has its perks, right? Like, we have an ENT who can go in and like solve this like chronic sinus infection I have, or you have appendicitis, right? You have a GI surgeon who can go in and like take that out and not let you go septic. You break something, like you have orthopedic. It's good to have these specialists to do these high level things, because general surgeons can't do it all, right? You can't be so good at one thing when you're doing everything, so that has its purpose, but it definitely, we're missing the ball a little bit. That I think holistic healthcare is now kind of filling the gaps, filling the voids, which is great. I mean,
and do you think that's because of a dissemination of information that people have access to these days? I was recently looking at not a study, but they were talking about how Gen Z specifically is starting to, I don't want to say villainize, but not consume alcohol as much, because they're recognizing the patterns of alcohol consumption, I would say, lagging indicators of going out on the weekend and getting wasted, waking up hungover the next day, has different effects on the days following. And as I've gotten a little bit older, I recognize the more I drink, the more I don't get sleep, the more I do not have healthy habits, the shittier I feel as a person in general. And it's interesting that this younger demographic is really kind of pushing this holistic message. But do you think it's because of the information that's available that people are starting to make better decisions and we're not kind of being led down the path like sheep?
Without a doubt, right? Like, you can, with the amount of information that's like on the internet, you could essentially put yourself through like a med school type, like I'm just thinking like high level school, med school, law school. Like, you can learn almost everything you need to learn about anatomy and physiology to be thinking at that high of a level, which is incredible, right? 20 years ago, that would be unheard of. And that, go even further back to like when our parents were our age. It's hard to compare the two. Like, I wish our parents had the same information we had, because like it's they would be in the same thinking bubble as us. And, you see parents and grandparents' health start to decline, and you try and help them, and you try and, but like, there's some value to the saying that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? Like, it's really difficult to change someone's mind when they've just been fed this narrative for so long, because that was it, right? You had like mainstream media, and whatever they said, you were like, oh, interesting, and you would kind of try and follow up and read some books. But and you and I could write a book about how Christmas trees are going to kill us.
Yep.
And it's not really convincing. Like you have no.
We could sell millions of copies.
Like you have no idea. Like that's the thing about books, is like there's so many out there. Like which ones are actually legit? What's backed by actual research? Now, like you can literally go on, PubMed, which is peer-reviewed literature, and read what the best like current evidence is for certain things. And I think that's what's ultimately going to save us, from this like broken healthcare system that's driven by like big pharma and big insurance, right? They kind of rule the world right now, and they're only getting bigger. But the only way for that cycle to get broken is for us down here to have enough knowledge that we're not listening to what's happening up here anymore. Like we hear what you're trying to do, we see what you're trying to say. People are willing to pay out of pocket for the right care now, because they're like, yeah, I know my insurance would cover this and I would have a $0 copay, but I'm going to pay $150 for this because I'm going to be better and healthier. And I think without a doubt, just the availability of information is at an all-time high.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because there's even a dichotomy in that, because even today we see so much information being disseminated by influencers, and I'll call them like the little med and the little insurance companies and the little farm companies, because I think in our generation today, popularity is often confused with authority. And so one of the things that I always kind of hedge against is all of the woke biohackers that are out there who are talking about these processes and these supplements and this other stuff that you should be taking, but they don't have the actual knowledge and the research backing what they're talking about. And I'm not sure if you've seen this as well, but it seems like there's a lot of people who are willing to stand on a podium and speak their truth, although they're not grounded in actual evidence. And I think that's a really dangerous place for us to be in as well.
Oh God, without a doubt. And that's like, that kind of ties into being an athletic trainer is, there's evidence-based practice, and then there's anecdotal evidence, right? Sorry.
You're good.
And they always say, if you do everything evidence-based practice, you might not get the best results. Even though this is like what the best literature is saying right now, it's hard to get things into literature. Like it's a rigorous process. It's hard to get things published. So what you're seeing is these influencers being strictly anecdotal. They have no evidence-based practice. I don't know what's going on.
You're good. Maybe we're a little bit nervous. I'm just kidding. So to recap, right? So I was talking about, the difference between like the woke biohackers and everybody else who's putting out information. You were talking about anecdotal versus research-backed information.
Yeah. If you go one or the other, to me, it's not good, right? You go evidence-based practice, like strictly what's the literature say, we're going to do that. There's a lot of stuff anecdotally that does work, right? I mean, the carnivore diet right now, it's not very well researched, but people are like healing these autoimmune injuries that doctors tell them, you're going to live with this for the rest of your life. Like, we're going to give you meds to help you, but like you're stuck with this. And then they go on this carnivore diet where, they're completely healed from this autoimmune. So it's like, how do you not take that into account? But if you go straight anecdotal, right? You go just, you're kind of, you're standing on a house of cards, and it might have worked for you, but you could be the 1% that it works for. And people try and profit off of it, right? Like,
yeah.
Oh, check this out. Check out my story. And then you're like, oh, cool. And then it doesn't work.
Yeah, I think it's just such an interesting place to be in, because there's just so much information out there, but so much of it is not legit. And one of the things that I've really appreciated about you is like a sense of curiosity. So curiosity from my perspective is not just being interested in different things, but being willing to try different stuff out so we can see if it's going to work for us. And so one of the things that, I know that you do as well, and we kind of like talked on this while we were, chopping up a little bit, was you have a coffee practice. So you actually weigh out your coffee every single day. You take it through an actual process where you put it through a steamer. Talk about your coffee process and how you kind of got in love with coffee and why you put so much emphasis on it.
Yeah, it's the little things, right? It's the little things in life that I fall in love with. To me, it's a ritual. That's what I call it now. It's my morning ritual. It's you can break it down into, it's more financially smart, right? You're not buying coffee every day, which true. But dude, you start digging into you start nerding out. It's like, wait, I make a better cup of coffee than I would get at the barista down the road anyway, and it's a fraction of the price. And like, it sets the tone for my day. Like, I do it every single morning, right? I make my coffee one of two ways. I do a pour over or I do an AeroPress. And, I have my exact ratio and I have my exact temperature, and I've tweaked it, I've changed it. I thought this was the best one for a long time, and then I tried this, and oh my God, this is way better. And it's a cool, like, I kind of like, you just adapt with new information and you apply it and trial and error, and then you find this ridiculous cup of coffee, and now I need to share it with everyone who comes over. I'm like, you need coffee. And they're like, no, I'm good. I'm like, no, you need a coffee.
Yeah, you need real coffee.
And it's my favorite when someone tells me, like, I just don't like coffee. And I'm like, let me make you a cup of coffee.
Because like so much of the coffee that we drink is just like ultra processed. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was listening to one of my favorite creators on YouTube, this guy named Sean Cannell, and he talks about here in Vegas, there's a couple spots that you can go to get an actual cup of coffee. One is called Mothership. So if anybody's here in Vegas, you probably heard of Mothership, but they have like the most organic beans, and they grind them by hand at the time of your actual coffee being made. And you can absolutely tell the difference, because when I go to Starbucks or somewhere else like that, it just feels so processed. It doesn't feel as authentic. And I feel like that's where a lot of our society, especially from a product consumption perspective, has really gotten.
Yeah. And even like down to the grind, right? Having a fresh grind. If you're not grinding your beans right before you make your coffee, it's not going to be fresh. It's probably going to have mold in it now because moisture just sits in those grinds. It ruins the whole flavor profile. And now you take it a step before that. If it was roasted 7 months ago and you're finally grinding it to consume it, like, that's a stale bean. So that's why I use Stumptown. Shout out to freaking Stumptown. They I have a subscription with them, and when I click order, they roast my beans the moment I click order, and then overnight my beans to me.
Oh wow!
So I'm 1 day old roasted beans. And so it's like, talk about bringing like freshness to another level. It's like, all right, great. Now you need to, age that for 2 weeks, store it properly. So it does, you kind of stop it at like the 14-day mark, and it stays in a mason jar, and then I crack it when I need it. And it's good for a while. But if you go to any store where you can buy beans, even if it's good local beans, right? We have a place around here in Rhode Island called Dave's Coffee. Awesome spot. They make good beans. You go buy it in a grocery store, the roast date's going to be on it, and it's going to be like 4 months ago. It's like, well, these aren't fresh, so I don't want them. It's like, so it's there's just so many like nuggets, right? And when you start paying attention to all these tiny little details, someone who doesn't care about that, right? Who just got into making coffee and they just started grinding their coffee every morning instead of buying like pre-ground coffee, that's going to be life-changing for their cup of coffee. Now, once your palate gets used to that, you're like, okay, let me get fresh roasted beans versus old beans. And you're like, oh my God, right? So it's kind of cool how you just like keep going, and then you can dig into like the kind of filter paper you're using, right? Is it organic? Is it bleached, right? Is it natural? Is it, are you using metal? Are you using a plastic, right? I can nerd about that. I've nerd out about this forever.
I mean, I think it's like what this really comes down to is like intentionality. You know what I mean? And when I think of intentionality, I think of being intentional with our actions, being intentional with our thoughts, the things that we're putting into our body. And that can be really overwhelming for a lot of people, because I feel like so much of our society today is just like eating and consuming and believing exactly what we've been handed instead of like challenging the status quo.
Right. Yeah. It's intention's a great term, being intentional in what you're doing. And, I think I've been very aware of like where I'm placing intentions these days, and and it helps you prioritize certain things. Like once you're more critically aware of these different aspects of your life, and you know how to place intention in certain spots, and place more intention here versus here, where before you were just intentionally doing a lot of things, but it's like, well, now you can actually start to like create your hierarchy, and to me, random segue, like having a kid was like one of the biggest things that like made you be self-aware, hypercritical about like where your intentions lie, because like this little human is soaking up everything I do. And now you become so ridiculously self-critical and self-aware of everything you do. Like you have to be intentional about what you like. You just there's no other way to do it.
Let's talk about that for a second. So you have a daughter,
I
and
do.
especially raising a daughter in today's world must be challenging, from looking at the future and kind of thinking about the hurdles that she's going to have to come from a societal factor. So what
Right.
are some of the things that you're thinking about from like a family basis and raising a daughter in 2023 and beyond? What are some of the priorities that you're thinking about?
I mean, like the biggest thing you hear, right? It is like people, women, but I mean guys now too, like with daddy issues, right? Like, oh, this girl, like that is like exactly the opposite of what's going to happen in this household, right? Like I am abundantly present in her life. I do work a crazy job, right? I'm driving all over the place. I work 60 to 70 hours a week, but like any given moment that I have free and I know she's not sleeping, like I'm going to be around, right? We have our cute little inside jokes, and we have our, like, there's nothing better than like knowing how much she's looking forward to seeing you or spending her time with you. And obviously that's reciprocated, right? That's all I look for. Of course I want to see my wife, but like I come home, like I can't wait for Amari to run up to me and give me a hug and say, let's do Superman, and I throw her on the couch. It's like that's what I come home to every day. And how do you set her up for success in life, right? Like she's 2.5, she turns 3 in March. You're thinking about like, all right, she needs to be like a strong, independent woman, obviously, right? Like she needs to have, be able to protect herself, period, right? With all the craziness that goes on in our world today, all these crazy, sick, terrible headlines you see every day. Like, how do I not let my daughter ever be a victim of those things? How do I prepare her properly to if she's ever, like, God forbid, in that situation, not be a headline, right? So it's it starts with like, what do you value? Like my wife and I sit down and we chat about this. Like, where do our values lie? What's the our hierarchy of like what she should be learning and believing in life? And that's kind of comes to that intentions, right? It's like it's really neat to start to like really critically analyze these things, because if not, like, what's going to happen, right? We've all seen it. We've all seen people where that wasn't there in their childhood, and it starts now. Like it, well, 1,000% starts now, because who you are when you're 10, and then 15 and 20, like everything builds in life. So if we start these right things right now, we're going to set her on that right path.
I mean, it's just like so many. The one thing that I think I've experienced, especially, are your parents still together?
They're not.
Okay. So the common story that we've experienced in our generation is that we always come from parents that have split up, single family
Yep.
households. And when I think about the role of the father, especially in today's world of social media and exposure and ideas and influence and everything else that's out here, the role of the father is so important in today's society, because the dad teaches us how to respect ourselves, teaches us how we should interact with other people. But then when you're a girl dad, you know what I mean? It's so much more amplified, because I've always been really excited about having kids, because I always thought having a daughter would be awesome, because I would love to teach her all the things that she should know about guys, and how she should respect herself, and how she's going to be able to handle all of these little fuck boys, if you will, that come at her in the future, because there are so many people who are just led in the wrong direction. And so being a girl dad is just like such a blessing.
And it's empowering, right? It's I get this question, like, or I question like people that that I love and that I think are great people. And I'm like, why don't you want to have kids? Right. Like, and they're like, it's kind of scary to bring kids into this world. And it's like, that's exactly why you need to bring kids into this world. There's too many fuckboys and like terrible people. We need more good people raising good children, like, period. And that's always been my thought process. It's like, I know you as a person. I love who you are. I know you would raise an incredible human being. Like, we need you to be doing these things. And I feel like we have more people doing the opposite. And, the people who probably, maybe shouldn't be having kids are having like 7, right? And it's like they're populating the earth, and it's just, it is a scary thought. It's a scary thought to like, I got to bring a kid into this world. And like, who knows what the world's going to be like in 20 years, right? Given everything that's going on right now overseas, and who knows what it's going to be in 5 years, right? Are we still going to be here? Is someone going to like push the nuke button and then like we're going to all be blasted off the face of the earth? Like, that's potential.
That's a real threat.
In my trench right now, dude.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I mean, do you think anything has changed in your mindset? Because I was listening to a podcast one time and they were talking about the get shit done gene that turns on once you have a kid. Have you noticed a difference in your mindset, your drive ever since you had your daughter?
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely always had it. But it's like tenfold now, I used to, you know me, I cram my days, right? Like, my in-laws make fun of me. They're always like, oh, there's Hunter trying to slide something else into his day. Like, cause I know I'll have dinner here and like, oh, there's like a 45-minute window. I could probably like go like sling the bow for a little bit and like shoot the bag and whatever, maybe a quick workout. But like, once your day is over, like, all right, like maybe the dishes need to get done and like maybe I could fold some clothes, but like I'll do it tomorrow. Like, I'm tired. Like I packed my day. Now it's like there's that aspect is always like, I need to get that done. Like that, why leave things for tomorrow when it can get done today? Like, I have a little human that's going to be walking around, seeing the environment that we're living in. So it amplified it to there's a new tier that I didn't know existed. Let's say that. It's just like kind of comes out of nowhere. And like, random segue into like your capacity to love a human being, to your capacity of love, right? Like, in that same vein, like, didn't even know it existed, right? And then you see your daughter for the first time and you watch her grow, and it's like, holy moly. Like, I want my boy Keenan Hart to experience this, right? I want like all of my people that I love to experience what this feeling is, because it you can't explain it. You didn't know it existed, like, which is wild.
I mean, it's that get shit done gene that turns on. And like, we just have, I think the most amazing experience, and this is what all fathers say, is like, once you see that human that you created, you see so much of yourself in it, and you prioritize that thing above everything else. Like, the relationship you have with your wife, awesome. But the relationship you have with your daughter, incredibly amazing. You know what I mean? And there's like that hierarchy, which is really interesting.
Yeah. And that's going to like, stand that's going to like transcend through time, right? Like that little girl is going to be taking care of me when I'm older and I need help,
Yeah.
And with my wife, and it's the get shit done thing, dude. You get shit done, man. It's
super powerful. One of the things that I'm really interested to learn a little bit more about is, ever since you left Hawaii, you started bow hunting. So let's talk about kind of your bow hunting experience, how you got into it, why you enjoy it so much.
That's a good question. I mean, given my name, I feel like I should have been doing this since I was like,
yeah, exactly.
And it's funny, right? Like, anytime I tell someone I bow hunt or like whatever, they're like, "Oh, fitting," like, obviously. And I'm like, honestly, it's like a new hobby for me. So, but the interest actually started in Hawaii, right? Because there's wild pigs everywhere, and there's crazy deer everywhere, especially all over in like Molokai and Lanai. Like, you have all those axis deer running rampant. You see videos on Instagram of herds of these axis deer. Like, people are trying to drive down a road and they're sitting there for 5 minutes recording, like, all these deer go by. So it kind of started to pique my interest. Like, oh, it'd be kind of fun to start doing that. And when I got home, like, my buddy Lou, the Ultimate Pursuit guy, and Shane had just gotten into it. Like, they just got their bows. It was their first season, right? I moved home at the end of 2020, so in November. And that's right when the rut is. So that's like the most important time of the year to hunt. and they had both like just got a bow, and they're like, they had no idea what they were doing, but they're like, we're gonna go get a deer. And I swear to God, my buddy Shane, like first rut ever hunting, he gets this massive 11-point buck.
Oh my God, he's hooked for life.
I remember the phone call. He like couldn't speak. He was like this like ridiculous form of energy, and like I didn't even know what state of mind this dude was in, but I knew, I was like, holy moly, like this is different, right? And I think that goes down to, there's so much that goes into bow hunting, right? Like it's not just, hey, I got a rifle and I'm sitting there and I was in the right place at the right time and I got it done. It's like,
yeah, I really don't understand the difference either, because I grew up in Michigan, right? And people were always talking about hanging out in the hide and kicking it with their rifles. They put out a little bit of like a salt lick or something like that. Deer comes up, bah, got this. But what is the difference from your perspective in bow hunting and hunting with a rifle?
which, to be honest, like I'm not against rifle hunting. I will go rifle hunting or shotgun hunting or muzzleloader hunting, because what I care about at the end of the day is like, I want to put food on the table. I want like sustainable meat, right? Like I took care of, like I took this animal, I processed it myself. Like we do all of it ourselves. We don't send it to a butcher. Like we field dress it, we let it age, we do all the cuts ourselves, vacuum seal. So everything is like done in house. So to that piece, like I get that. Like you just want to stock the fridge or stock the freezer. I want meat, through to the next season, and I'm all about that. But there's something about bow hunting where there's so much time and effort that goes into just being able to proficiently shoot an arrow, right? Like to be able to hit a dot like this from 40 yards is not easy, right? That takes like hours and hours and hours and like thousands of arrows to be able to do that. Now you have to do that with this creature that's moving through the woods. You have to be perfectly still. They can't see you or smell you, so you have to like spray yourself with all this stuff. You have to have your scent control dialed in. You have to know where the wind is. Like, so you do all of that stuff ahead of time, right? You're jumping through crazy amounts of hoops just to see a deer. Never mind, like, okay, there's the deer. I need to pull this bow back. I need to like stop shaking like I'm about to fall off a cliff and like take an ethical shot, right? Like what I want to do is I want to kill that deer I want that deer to die within 25 yards of that shot, right? I want to get the cleanest shot possible. And it doesn't, you ask any bow hunter, it doesn't happen every time, right? Sometimes you got to track it. You got to get a second arrow. Like that's part of it. Like that's part of the craziness of bow hunting. But like you put all those pressures together and then you get that shot. Like the buck I got last year, I couldn't have drawn it up better. But there's no feeling that I've ever felt in my life when I fired that arrow, I saw how perfect it was, and I knew it went down 40 yards. Like I barely had to track it.
Let's break down this story a little bit. Take me along the journey. Take me through the day and the process.
All right. So this is it's actually really funny because it was late rut and I woke up late and I was like, fuck. Like you want to be in your stand 45 minutes before sunrise, latest. Okay. And like I could see the sun already starting to rise. So it was probably like 10 minutes before sunrise. And I'm like, do I even go? I'm like, I'll go. Like I had everything set up too in my bag. Like I had my little thermos of coffee. I had like some snacks because I was preparing. Like during the rut, you don't go and sit for 3 hours. Like you go for almost an all day sit.
Oh wow!
So I'm sitting there. It's like sprinkling out, which is nice because it softens the ground so you can actually sneak in the woods and they won't hear you. So I get up in my stand and I'm kind of just like bummed, drinking my coffee. And I literally have coffee in my hand. I'm taking a sip. I'm like looking right. And this is 45 minutes I'm sitting down. Like I'm not expecting. I'm waiting for something to come hours from now. And I look and this buck comes like pounding through these two trees and just like stops. And I'm like holding my coffee. My bow's like on the tree behind me. I'm not even holding it. I'm like, oh, this is the first time I've seen a buck in my life.
Oh,
I've
wow.
only seen doe every time I've ever been out. This is the first time I see a buck. And I'm like, oh my God.
It just like magically appears through the woods and just like stands. That has to be like the most exhilarating feeling.
And again, for the same reason that like I could sneak in the woods without hearing anything, you can't hear them coming until they're honestly in like the line of sight. and the woods that I hunt in are pretty dense. So I have like 3 shooting windows, and unless you're in those shooting windows, like I'll never see them. Sometimes I'll hear them, and anywho, so he comes bounding in, and I'm like, okay, like I can't blow this. So I like put my little cap on my thermos, like I'm moving. I swear to God, like this, because if you move any faster than this, they're gonna look up at you. So I'm like, all right, and I'm sitting too. Like you never want to take a seated shot, so I need to somehow stand up in my stand, grab my bow, pull this thing back. So I finally like get my bow. I like knock an arrow, and I'm like staring at it, and it's just hanging around, right? I'm hoping it doesn't run away. And it finally like goes off to my left and beds down, like lays down under a tree, right? And like a little background for Rut, all these things are doing is running around trying to catch some tail, dude. They're like roided up dudes on spring break. They're just like
It's time.
they're just like hunting for anything and everything. And it's funny because you'll see them like exhausted because they just like chased a doe for 4 hours. Now they're like, I need to take a nap. So this thing beds down in a like it's 15 yards from me, not far, and there's a tree perfectly in my way though, so I can't do anything. So I'm just like sitting there. It took me, I think it was like 28 minutes. I just sat there holding my bow. That he just took a little power nap, and I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? So I'm just like being patient. That's all you can do. Finally gets up, starts walking back into like right where like my big opening is, and I like finally pull it back. He looks at me because he saw something move, and I'm like, it's not even where I need it to be yet. Like I haven't actually sighted it in. He finally like starts taking a couple other steps, and he's about to leave like back into the forest. So I like, you call it like a merp. You literally go because it like you need to get their attention again to freeze them. And I finally had him and like fired it, and it was like such a clean shot, like through and through the lungs, that it didn't make a sound. Normally you hear like a flap or something. It went right through. I thought I missed.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, I blew it. 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 I was like, I can't even tell my friends. It's like, I'm not going to tell Shane and Lou. I'm going to pretend like I didn't see anything today. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. And I sat there for another 15 minutes, like hating myself. And I get down and I look at the arrow in the ground, and it's just blood. And I'm like, oh my God. And yeah, I waited like 20 minutes. I actually waited for Shane to come up. He was like, dude, I'm coming to track it with you. We found it very quickly. Big boy. It was like finding that deer, right? Like seeing that arrow, knowing that I did it, and then like finding that deer was just, talk about like serotonin, like euphoric, like, yeah, like I'm feeding my family with this, right? Like all of that time and effort that I've, and intention that I've put into this sport, this craft, like here's the fruition, you know? Talk about like a true reward for a ton of hard work. Crazy.
I mean, what a cool story. I mean, there has to be just like so much excitement and exhilaration knowing that you've put in the work, you've put in the time shooting the bag, hitting your targets, doing all this kind of stuff. Now the time comes, you actually get to down this buck, and then you get to break him down and then continue to feed your family with it. What an amazing experience.
Oh yeah. And not to mention like venison, like my daughter she's 2.5. She loves venison, like loves it. She's also, she loves like raw salmon and oysters, and she is, whatever boy just had to take her out in high school, like
good luck. Yeah, exactly, man. That's so cool. One of the other things I've always really been interested in, I've always wanted to ask you this is, what are some of the habits that you've built in your life? Because I always know that you're willing to try stuff. One of the cool things that I've recently started doing is cold plunging. My sister has a cold plunge, so I've been dabbling around a little bit in that space. One other thing that I've been doing as well in the morning, I break down some Celtic sea salt and put it in some water, so I can actually like kind of like give my body the ability to absorb the hydration that it needs, so I can get into the tissues and stuff like that. And that's been a little micro thing that I've been doing. I've noticed huge differences there. But what are some of the habits that you've kind of emphasized over the years? Some of the things that you've tried, the things that have worked for you, the stuff that hasn't.
I love that. I mean, physically, it's very similar, right? I do very frequent ice baths and saunas. So, anytime I wish I had a sauna here, but anytime I go to the gym, they actually just got a brand new sauna unit, so it actually gets up to 185. So it's like a legit sauna now, which is great. So every time I work out, sauna afterwards. I used to be really, really diligent with the ice baths. When it gets a little bit colder, it's a little bit more difficult,
Yeah,
right?
I could imagine for sure.
Go out there 30 degrees in the morning, just sit in the ice bath. I would say like this is the worst it's been in a while, and I'm probably averaging like 3 days a week. So it's like
Okay.
I'm still
Yeah,
doing
still
it.
very, very proficient.
I want to be, I'm a 5 or 6 dayer. Like that's where I want to be. So definitely still doing the ice bath. I do a ton of salt. So I use a company called LMNT,
Okay.
which is great. They're like these tiny little travel ones. 1,000 milligrams of sodium. They also have potassium and magnesium in them. So you getting like the other couple of electrolytes that are important. So I do those every day.
Why is that stuff so important for your body? If you could break it down from like a science perspective for us.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people are actually super deficient in electrolytes, and like the most important. So electrolytes, obviously, they they're like the guards of allowing things in and out of cells, right? So there's like electron like the way that things pass a gradient sometimes need an electrolyte, and they're like the gatekeeper at the cell membrane. So you need electrolytes in order for things to go in and out of cells, in order for things like processes to happen at the cellular level. And like the same reason why people are super dehydrated, you could drink a gallon of water a day, but if you're like they call it hyponatremic, it means like if you have that much low electrolytes or sodium, you're not actually retaining any of that water, right? Um, so if you know, right, like osmosis, right? Water is going to go to a higher density, um, like a place where there's more salt because it needs to dilute it and it needs to make it um, even. So we're going to retain more water if we eat more salt. So it helps hydration. It helps a lot of those processes. Just all of your organs function better when you're retaining more water. Um, but magnesium has been really interesting lately. So I actually do a second dose of magnesium in addition to the little electrolyte packets at night because of how much it's positively benefiting my sleep.
Okay, so magnesium is important for sleep. Got it. That's
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I've really been trying to focus on. Actually, my brother-in-law, because my sister just got recently married, he sent me a picture this morning. So he's an air traffic controller, and he gets the worst sleep ever. Like he has a Aura ring. His sleep scores are like in the 30s and 40s. Right there, you go. And he sent me a picture this morning where he got a Pod 8, I believe it's called, or a Sleep Pod 8. It's like a
Uh-huh.
mattress cover that goes over the top of your
Oh,
mattress, and
and
it
it cools.
tracks all the stuff and it cools you. And for the first time, he got 100% sleep score last night. And he was like, this is going to change my game. And it's really interesting because I don't think a lot of people think about the process of sleep and why it's so important. So
Right.
why did you start dosing magnesium to be able to help you with sleep?
I had terrible sleep habits. It's funny, in high school and college, I was very much like a night owl naturally, right? But if I was gonna if I had a big test coming up, I would get my best studying done from like 9 to 1, right?
Mm.
9 p.m. to 1 a.m. Like that was my best. Like I would grind, and for some reason it just worked for me. And then I like moved to Hawaii, was in grad school, and then the whole thing changed, and I became more of a morning person. Both were like deleterious to my sleep because I was either going to bed really late or waking up really early. And I got to a point where I've done such a good job controlling, like, all right, my workouts are dialed in, my nutrition is dialed in. I'm doing a lot of like intentional stuff like gratitude practices and working on relationships in my life. Like sleep still sucks. Like what is going on here? And then you just learn how much sleep affects everything, right? It's just your ability to heal. Like, that is when you heal, right? The biggest thing I tell anyone who ever has had a concussion is, a common myth is like, oh, should I not let him sleep? And it's like, all right, yeah, if you're worried about like some sort of like subdermal or epidural hematoma, but if you rule that out, like sleep is the best thing. Like sleep 20 hours a day. Sleep is how you heal. Period. Whether it's mind, body. So when I got to that point where I was like, I need my sleep to be better. I have to. It's like the one thing that's missing in my life. So yeah, you get the Aura ring, you start tracking. What is it? Why am I not recovering? Why is my heart rate elevated? Alcohol. I have one drink of alcohol. My normal resting heart rate's probably like 43 to 46. And if I have a drink of alcohol, it's in the 50s.
Wow.
I didn't even get buzzed from that, but like just that little bit of alcohol, now my resting heart rate, like my heart's working more, which means I'm not recovering as well as I should be. So, listen to a couple podcasts about magnesium and how it's like a lot of people, I think 80% of the population is deficient in magnesium, something like that, maybe 60. It's more than half. And like, all right, like we'll start supplementing with that and start to get better sleep. So it's just, I've always like tried trial and error, the bunch of different things to just, how does this whole sleep thing work better? How do I have better sleep hygiene? Get the blackout curtains, right? There's not a single light in the room. I even started adding like snake plant and ivy in the room because they're supposed to help you sleep. I don't know the science on that at all, but I read about it and I was like, I'll try anything, right? Like, give it a shot. Did it improve? It didn't. So the plants are out now, but yeah, it's forever changing. But I'd say I'm the most dialed in I've ever been.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's a really interesting concept that I heard from Atomic Habits with James Clear. And he talks
Mm-hmm.
about the idea of a rich man and a poor man. And he says,
Mm-hmm.
if I were to give you, poor man, a handful of coins, pennies, let's say, and then I were to give you another, and then I were
Yeah.
to give you another, and I were to give you another. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, you are not a rich man, but eventually there would be one penny that I would give you if we continued to do that on a long enough time horizon where you would be a rich man.
Mm-hmm.
And the same can be said about our habits. One of
Right.
the things that people don't think about is like how small things today have a gigantic impact on our future. And so our
Yeah.
brain is very good at, I would say, dramaticizing these ideas of these cataclysmic events that are going to happen in the future in our lives, but we never really think about how the small things affect our future. Imagine that you're a person who goes home and has a drink every single day. You're not going to
Mm-hmm.
get to good sleep. Eventually, you're going to have downstream effects that are going to negatively impact you. Same goes with eating chips and having bad dietary habits, right? We're very poor at recognizing how these small snacks every single night are going to impact our future. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting because I think you've been the perfect example of somebody who's willing to continue to make those deposits of those individual pennies that will eventually make you a rich man when it comes to all of your habits being dialed in, your diet being dialed in, your fitness being dialed in. There's just so many elements to making small decisions that have a gigantic impact on our life in general.
No, I appreciate that. That's definitely like where the intention lies. It's, um, you know, going off of kind of what we were just chatting about, like aside from all the physical things I do every day, like there's some mental things I try and do every day, and it's like I drive a lot, right? So I'm driving from account to account. So on my ride home every day, there's like three main things I try and think about. It's and one of them was inspired from you. The first one is like, who did I help today, right? Like who did I positively impact? Who did I actually help that needed help? The second one is, how did I spread positivity? Like that's my boy Keenan Hart. Like, how did I spread some sort of positivity? I try and like do that through my own positivity, right? Through my own like energy. And then the third thing, which will answer your question now, is like, how do I improve for tomorrow? Like, I did all of these things, right? Like, I have 1,062 pennies right now. Like, how do I get to 1,063 tomorrow? Like, what's one thing I'm gonna do to like compound everything I did today? Because I just noticed that for so long I was like trying new things and I just was still like in the same spot. And it's like I think you just need to like stick with those things and then add, right? Stick with those things and then add, and it's just that compounding effect gets you to a point where, yeah, I used to not think about sleep or my health or what I ate or working out, and now it's like all of that is super intentional, but it's second nature, right? That's my day, because you just do it for so long and it becomes part of life.
It really does. I mean, like one of the key things that I focus on, especially like in the fitness world, if you've ever been out of shape, right? You've ever been heavier and
Yeah.
you've made dramatic changes in your fitness. It wasn't the single workout that made a difference, but it was the lagging indicator of all of the compound work that you put on over a
Mm,
long enough time horizon that makes the biggest difference. And I feel
yeah.
like in today's society, we're so, I would say, swindled into believing this idea that change is going to be instantaneous, results are going to be instantaneous, instead of understanding that these things that we have to work for, we need to build enough momentum and proof that we are this person. So
Yeah.
eventually the result will come to us. That's a really interesting concept to me.
Everyone wants instant gratification, right? Like they want that. that instant gratifying, like, boom, okay, like I thought about it and I did it and now it's here. It's like not at all how it is, you know. It's it just reminds. I was literally talking to my buddy on the phone. I haven't talked to him in a few months. Literally last night, and we were just talking about life stuff, you know, catching up, like shooting the shit, like kind of digging into some stuff. And we were like really thinking, and I was like, just like the way that I'm super intentional with, or anyone's super intentional about their eating habits or their sleeping or like working out. You can work out every day for 10 years, but if you stop working out, everything's going to go to shit. You're going to lose all that muscle mass. Like, you've been doing this for 10 years. Like, nature doesn't care. If you don't keep doing it, it's not going to happen. And the segue of that was, I was talking to him about like a relationship with another person. I'm like, I'm a firm believer that like people are who they are. You know, like people can kind of change, but like the reason why people change is because they want to change and they put the intent into changing who they are as a person. And if they stop doing that intentional thing every day, they're going to revert back to who they've always been. And that's like one of the biggest like sobering thoughts I've had in a long time is like, people are who they are. And sometimes you have to accept that. But like you can see someone who's willing to wake up every day, make their intentions where they want them, and like be a different person, be a better version of their self. And when they stop doing that, like it is going to go away. Just like working out, it's going to go away. Just like not eating all these like processed foods is going to make you unhealthy. It's like the same thing across the board. And it's just like it's kind of interesting how it all comes together with like it's just you have to take that penny every day. Here's your penny. You got to do it. Like I really like that analogy. It's so spot on. And it's not just physical, it's mental, right? It's who you are, it's your personality, it's your relationships with your family, your parents, your kids, your friends, it's all of it.
When I started diving into self-improvement, one of the first examples that really stuck with me was an analogy about our internal thermostat, right?
Mm.
We have an internal thermostat that's set at like, let's say 78 degrees. And so there's going to be times when you run hot, you feel motivated, you're inspired, and you kick up to like 83 degrees, right? But once you stop feeling those feelings of motivation, we naturally kind of digress back down to that mean of, right, of our internal thermostat. And so recognizing where your thermostat is set, it's like we often don't achieve or rise to our full potential, but we fall to the level of our standards. Yeah. And if you're not going to be continuously improving your standards, you're really going to end up falling back into those old habits that you've built, because so much of what we go through in life, especially, I think I heard a stat the other day, it was like, by the time you are 30 years old, 80% of your habits and your routines daily are habitual because you've been doing them for so long. So you're basically an 80% baked person by the time you turn 30 years old. And I think that's really interesting because people fall into this dichotomy of thinking, I'll never improve. I am the way that I am. And I heard somebody the other day, and I want to get your opinion on this. There was a post on LinkedIn that went really viral. This one guy was on TikTok and he was talking about the world of self-improvement. He said the world of self-improvement is a lie, and it's something that we've been sold. You are good enough you are good enough the way that you are right now. And I thought that was really interesting because we've been fed this lie in society that you are good enough how you are. If you're out of shape, if you're overweight, if you're divorced, if you have bad relationships, you have bad emotional regulation, that's okay. And I just feel like there is, especially from the male perspective, there is always so much room to improve that we should always be doing those things. Me personally, I've come from a lineage of African-American men who have been slaves, who have been discriminated against, who have been overcoming so many challenges in their life that I would be doing all of them a disservice if I did not give them the love. Let's see if this pops up here. There we go. If I didn't give them the love that they deserved to be able to, push our lineage forward. And so what's your perspective on self-improvement? Is it something that we've been lied to and sold, or is it like an actual thing that we should be pursuing?
Absolutely not. I get the whole, the movement of like, there's a certain amount of like acceptance and like self-love that you should have. Right. And I think some people, like I am one of those people that's like, no one's going to be more of a critic about me than me. And I'm trying to like be better about that, right? Like understand, like, no, you have these accomplishments you can be proud of, and you have these things that you do well, that you can like look back on and like just say like, yeah, like hell yeah, like give yourself a pat on the back instead of being like, you're not doing this, you missed this day, you didn't work out, like you didn't wake up early enough, but that is like that is why we are where we are in 2023, right? Like, you have to keep pushing, you have to, like, you can't settle. Like, I don't like that term, that like you are enough right now and you don't need to keep improving. I think that's I don't want to say a cop out, but like, you are enough, right? Like, you in certain aspects, sure, but like, why are you not trying to improve? And like, you're not perfect. Like, you're not, whatever you believe in, like, you're not God, you're not Jesus Christ. Like, you aren't perfect. So why not keep trying to be a better person for your wife or your kids or your brothers and sisters? Like, why not be a better coworker at your job? Um, so I think that that's the key, is like, you want to be better for yourself, but for the people around you. And I think that's like a challenge that like the whole industry faces, is um like in the mental health and well-being space, right? Are people avoiding adversity nowadays, right? Are they like, I want to feel mentally good about this thing, so are you just avoiding adversity? Because to me, adversity is what makes everything stronger, right? You're not going to grow bigger muscles unless you stress them, right? You're not going to be a better person unless you have these challenges and overcome them, right? It's all that process of adversity and overcoming it.
I mean, I would love to hear, I want to take this in a little bit of a different direction because, I think the masculine lifestyle in itself is based in hardship, right? There's a famous quote out there that says, hard times create strong men. Wait, I'm sorry. Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times.
Mm-hmm.
I feel
Breathe.
like the masculine journey in itself, if you think about history, right?
Yeah.
The masculine role in the lifestyle that we live has always been incredibly challenging and incredibly difficult. And the world that we live in today has been so nerfed that we feel like our journey in life is supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be something that is, we shouldn't have to come across hardship. And why do I have to overcome these challenges? But it's like at the core of who we actually are, we are meant to be challenged and we are meant to overcome hardship. And I feel like from the masculine perspective, we need more of that in our society because we're losing out on kind of like the mission and the drive that we've come from thousands and thousands and thousands of years of lineage. It's really interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think we're at that, good times create soft people, or soft, it's like, I think we are 100% like in that crux of the cycle. And I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, things are good, you don't have too much adversity, you're not improving, you're not striving to be better. And to me, it applies to like raising a child, man. It's like, if you give your kid everything they want in life growing up, then they're gonna have no idea how to handle it, because they're gonna handle adversity, they're gonna handle challenges, they're gonna handle not getting a good grade on that test and failing and having to retake, or not getting the job or the promotion. It's like, if I don't let her struggle literally right now, right? Like, last night she was trying to get this, she has one of those little toy barns, and she's trying to get this little animal out the window, and like, it hinges open, right? Like, to grab it out, but she like had to get out of the window. And she's like, Daddy, help, Daddy, help, Daddy, help. And she starts freaking out, and like, classic like temper tantrum kid. And it's like, you got this, like, positive, like, just try and like, you got this, give her some advice. But if I just go down, open it, and give her the animal, like, what did she learn? She learned that if I complain, I'm gonna get what I want, and that was really easy. Instead, like, let me critically think about why the heck this camel won't fit through this window. It's like, oh, I have to turn its head a little bit more sideways, and then I can wiggle it out. And it's like, oh my god. And like, watching that happen in real time, it's like the same thing, with us. And agree, like you said, specifically with men, right? Like, we haven't been under more scrutiny than ever, right? Like, just like with the whole toxic masculinity, and like, are those traits actually toxic? And to like keep that thought rolling, like Jordan Peterson's thought, right? Like, he has a specific bit, and I'm gonna butcher what he says 100%, but he talks about like, should you be a dangerous human being but be able to control that, right? Do you want to be the warrior in the garden, or the gardener in the war?
Yeah.
And it's like, that thought is money, because it's like, you should, like, that is way more impressive to be a warrior in a garden, right? To be that person that can harness so much violence and danger and like power, but like I know how to control that, and I know when it is applicable and not applicable. Whereas if I'm just not dangerous at all, I'll never be dangerous, right? And like I don't think that's the right thought. I think that creates a soft time, a soft that part of the cycle.
It's really scary because, I think our generation has been scrutinized a little bit because of like the whole eighth place trophy ideology, right? They're like, well, you guys are given eighth place trophies and blah, blah. And I was like, all right, let's break this down to first principles. If I'm a 7-year-old and I'm participating in a soccer tournament and I get an eighth place trophy, who was the person who actually enabled me with that eighth place trophy? It wasn't me as the individual child, but it was the generation who came before us, which get handed down these ideologies of making us softer. And so I always like to challenge the status quo by asking who was the people who raised this generation, which I think is really interesting. But I feel like it's our job today, especially as men, to be able to stand up and to be that warrior in a garden, because it's so much more necessary than ever. And one of the things I think is really interesting is your jujitsu practice. So let's talk about this a little bit. Why did you get into jujitsu, and why is it so functional from your masculine perspective, and why you like rolling so much?
Right. No, it's that, I'm probably a year in now, so like very new, right? And a lot of the thought process came from like, I'm just a competitive dude that like, I need to get it out. I like need to compete. Like I need to like strive to win at something, because I'll probably implode if I don't. It's just that weird innate thing that I have. And for me, for a long time, it was basketball, right? Like, I played basketball ever since I was in 6th grade. I picked up kind of late. Like even practice with like the practice team in college. Like I was literally playing 6-7 days a week. You saw me in Hawaii. I played in 3 separate men's leagues year round. Like my wife wanted to kill me. It's like, oh, Monday, Thursday, and Friday. Like I gotta be at this gym 30 minutes across the island. But I loved it, man. Like that was it though. It's like I can go out there, I can just like compete and get like do this thing. And I got back, and there weren't many leagues or like many people I knew that were playing, so I stopped playing basketball as much, but I could feel that itch, and I like couldn't scratch it. And I stumbled into jiu-jitsu, and I was like, all right, interesting, like very humbling, right? I did karate from age 4 to 12, so I had like 8 years of martial arts.
Okay.
Traditional martial arts. So I was a black belt in I am a black belt in Shorin-ryu, Shorin-kan, but like I'd stopped when I was 12 years old, right? So like I don't really consider it much anymore, but I had some martial art experience. But grappling, I never wrestled. That type of martial art was more Muay Thai, stand up, like point style for striking. So I walked in that first day, like I've never been so out of place and so nervous for anything in my life. Like I was nervous moving to Hawaii, but like I know I'd meet friends and make connections. Dude, I've never been so nervous. Probably it's been a decade since like walking into that first day of jiu-jitsu. Like I don't know what's gonna happen. I'm gonna get strangled out a bunch of times. Like I'm gonna, and it's like just falling in love with that, being able to just make crazy decisions while being in a physical altercation. I'm like, okay, how do I get out of this? How do I figure this out? Kind of stems back to like athletic training. Like all of it kind of comes together for me. Is like I love problem solving, and I love high pressure situations, right? Like shooting a deer. It's like it's kind of like puts it all together into one sport, and dude, I'm like all in on it now. I've had some like not great injuries from it, but like it's not going to stop me. It's never going to stop me.
And I think one of the coolest things about it is one of my experiences, I did one jujitsu class. It was like a basics class, right? And I walk in there, I'm a big dude. I'm 6'6", 240 pounds. And
Right.
I start putting my hands on these other men, and we're literally just like grappling and doing this stuff. And one of the processes that we had to go through actually was really interesting. I got into, I want to say like a top mount on somebody, and they're like, your objective, person on the bottom, is to escape. So at any means, just get out of this top mount. And it felt so good to just be able to just like manhandle another person. Because the last time I did that was like in football. You know what I
Right.
mean? And so it was like such a good release of like my masculine energy to be able to
Yeah.
put my hands on somebody in a constructive manner. It was just
Yeah.
so rewarding. And I
Right.
need to definitely get back into it because it was something that I absolutely loved.
And what's really fun is like if you fail, like, oh, tap, okay, let's do it again. Right? Like you're in a like a borderline life or death situation, but it's control. It's
Yeah.
like, all right, if you fuck up, like, all right, I won't actually strangle you because I could kill you. Like, I could kill you right now, but like you tapped, all right, let's go. Like, let's do it again. And it's just like you hit the reset button, and you're like, all right, let's do this. Um, I actually had a really good session this week on Thursday. It was like I had never been so tired, but like when you're that tired, just like trying to grind through that, like I'm physically exhausted, my grips are gone, I'm mentally like I'm trying to like think when I'm in these certain positions, like how do I get this sweep, how do I pass this guard, and it's like being able to still like grind out of that, and like that is like that's fun. That like being in that not great spot and trying to persevere through, like that's the addicting spot part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like overcoming those micro challenges, right? I think we as men, we need to be consistently challenged on a daily basis, and putting yourself in those life or death scenarios is in a controlled space and it's fun. But at the other part of it, you also want to be that warrior in a garden. So if there ever was a situation in a society where you had to
Yeah.
defend yourself or your family, you'd know how to get somebody into these positions and end some stuff really quickly.
Right. Because I mean, how many videos do you see of these like these street fights that are just like ugly and they're just like trying to hurt each other? And it's like I could actually control another human without even hurting them, but I could control them to the point where they're no longer a threat. I don't actually have to do any damage to anyone, right? And I can protect the people that they were trying to hurt themselves, right? You know, like you can start jujitsu when you're 4 years old. You bet your ass Mari's going to be in there when she's 4 years old.
Yeah.
Like talk about like imagine some predator trying to take her and she just like she knows how to handle herself physically. You know, it's just like that confidence in being able to defend yourself is everything, you know. So it is it's nice to be able to like you said get that like masculine out, and you walk out of there and you like shake hands and it's like all love, and it's like the same feeling as a CrossFit like gym, right? You walk into a jiu-jitsu gym and you walk out and you're like, holy, like this is like family right here, you know. Which it's been an awesome discovery in the last year of my life.
Yeah, man. Well, I want to use the last couple seconds here to give you an opportunity to kind of articulate why you are proud of Hunter as you currently are, and what kind of goals you're setting for yourself in 2024, because we've only got a couple more days until 2024 kind of wraps up
Right.
or starts launching in here. And so what are
Yeah.
some of the things that you're thinking about in 2024? First of all, how are you proud of Hunter as you are today and the things that you've accomplished? And number two, 2024 and what you're looking forward to.
So to start, like, what am I proud of? Right. What am I grateful for that I've created in my own life? And I have a quick like side note on that thought because there's something I wanted to chat about earlier. I don't know if you've ever heard that Huberman podcast about his like being grateful and like what you know. I used to like wake up in the morning and write like 5 things I'm grateful for, and he actually like dug into the science. Have you ever heard that pod?
No,
Like
let's
where
check it out. Talk about it.
he pretty much says like the most efficacious way to like put your mind in this like grateful like receptive being is you want to pick a time, specifically a time where someone was grateful for what you did, not the opposite. You don't want to think about like, oh, I was grateful for Keenan for that time that he, you know, did X, Y, and Z. It was like, no, like Keenan was grateful for me for this time. And you like, it can be the same thing every morning. So I try and do this when I'm driving in the car. Like I said, I'm in the car a bunch. And like the first 5-10 minutes, I try and think of like that one thing. And you want to think about it in as much detail as possible, as if you're like living the moment again. And the science on that is like leaps and bounds over anything you could ever do for like gratefulness practice. And I wasn't sure if you ever heard that, and I know it's something that you would probably like love and like tweak around with. But the hardest part for me of doing that was like the question you just asked me, like, what are you proud of yourself? Like, it's hard to like sit there and be self critical on on the good things you do. It's super easy to be like, oh, I messed this up. I'm not good enough at this. But to sit there and be like, oh, Keenan was grateful for me because I brought him Taco Bell in the ER while he was waiting to get, like it's hard to sit there because you almost feel selfish and you almost feel like, but like it's important to just be able to actually say, yeah, I'm grateful for this. And I think I'm proud of this. And so, yeah, what are your thoughts on like that whole.
Dude, I mean, there's so much science that's out there about the practice of gratitude. Do you know what I mean? And it's not only beneficial for yourself, but it's also beneficial for the other person. And so I was
Right.
actually on a recent podcast where I was talking about the practice of gratitude, and everybody thinks that it's so fluffy and so like, you
Mm.
know, it's so intangible when we think about these things. But an interesting concept is, and I kind of want to dive into this a little bit. Charlie Munger, um, Warren Buffett's partner in Berkshire Hathaway, just passed away. He was 99 years old, and he had an idea called inverse thinking. And he was like, if you ever want to attack a problem, think about the inverse of what you're trying to attack. So a great example is, if I were trying to become unhealthy, what would I do? I
Yep.
would probably not go to the gym. I would probably eat snacks all day. I would do these type of things because your brain is so much better at coming up with the problems that you can
Yeah.
think about rather than the positive outcomes or the things that will have a positive impact. And
Mm.
so even when you're talking about, it's difficult for me to go into a place of gratitude because my brain doesn't work that way. We're much better at thinking of problems, right?
Yeah.
And going back to the practice of gratitude in itself, man, is just like so multiplicative. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I've been putting out some content recently on social media about me going around and handing out notes to people in like
That's
public
so
spaces.
I love it.
And it's so interesting because the psychology of that is something called an ecological momentary intervention. It's an interruption throughout your day that can help you think happier thoughts. And that's the emphasis of what we do here at FRANSiS with our text messages. It's an interruption that catches you off guard. But what I've been
Mhm.
doing is personalizing and personifying that by handing out these little notes to people. And it's so interesting because when you interrupt somebody's day with the message of gratitude, you see them light up because it takes them out of their thought process and everything else that they're doing. But it has a multiplicative effect on impacting the people around them because
Yeah.
you can tell when somebody is in a place of gratitude. You know what I mean? And it rubs off on you because it's like, oh man, I want that feeling as well. It's just so interesting.
Right. And it's I love how you're personalizing it by doing it in person, right? Just like it's like, with social media, we've like made everything so digital that like these face-to-face interactions are that much more important and that much more special. So you go and do that for someone and then they're going to be like, I want to do that for someone. Like I want to have that impact on someone else, right? Like, and now you just create this beautiful cascade of positivity and like breaking, especially it's like someone you don't even know. It's like a stranger here, boom, like, and they're like, oh my god, like that's why, dude. I love following your dude. I have you my notifications on, so anytime you have like a new one, I'm like, oh, what did you do today? Like it's like it's so great.
You know,
But
you said something to me one time. You were like, Keenan, I appreciate you because you've been able to kind of, I would say, I don't want to use the word negatively, but monetize your own personal mission, right? I've built a business around spreading positivity, around being somebody who's going to encourage others. And I think in this world today, we have so many opportunities to be a positive impact on others instead of being that negative light, which gets so much popularity in the world. But if we continue to go down that path, if you just exponentially compound it out in the future, I would hate to see where our society's at if everybody is being negative all the time. You know what I mean? And I think we need more people being positive and practicing gratitude on a daily basis because those are the things that are going to truly have an impact on not only ourselves, but the people around us as well.
yeah, and that I truly meant that too. It's just like this has been you for as long as I've known you, and you are able to make a living out of it. Like you built a business around who you are as a human, which like talk about authenticity, talk about like, businesses thrive when they're purely authentic. And of course, like you're going to crush it with FRANSiS and all of this stuff that you're doing. Cause like it is you, you're just projecting it into in the environment and to everyone around you. And now, you have like a social media platform where you can reach people that you would never even think of reaching. And it's beautiful. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a really cool practice, man. Well, I really appreciate, the encouragement because it means a lot. You know, being a positive person all the time is a heavy tax that I have to pay because
Hard.
often I don't get the encouragement from other people. I'm always the person who's serving others, which is a big challenge for being a positive person or just going zigging when everybody else is zagging. You have to be able to take the heat and kind of carry the weight of what that responsibility holds as well.
Right. And you need it too. It's like I was thinking, you know, I think one of the things we chatted about was like what you're doing in your job and what you do with like life and family. It's like I feel like I'm trying so hard at all these aspects that sometimes I walk through the door and I get home and I can just like stop doing it. And it's the exact opposite. It's like you need to be even like my family comes before my job, before my friends. So like I need to like up the amplitude when I walk in the door instead of like shutting it off. But like sometimes you need, right? You need that like moment of you're so intentional throughout your whole day with everything that you're doing with everyone that you're around, and the people who need it most are my wife and my daughter,
Yeah.
and so like to answer your question, that is 100% my priority going into 2024 is like making, because I definitely fall victim to that where I'm just exhausted from doing it all day, and my wife's a trooper and she gets it and she knows like, but like I don't want to be the dad that comes home and is like, I need my space, I need a beer and sit down. It's like no, like let's go for a walk, like let's do Superman, let's play in your play kitchen and make some wasabi eggs because that's what she likes to make. And it's like, like be that dad and be that person, that husband, and like that's the goal for 2024 is like upping the amplitude when I walk in that door rather than maybe not having as much energy when I come home.
Well, I think you're doing an amazing job of it, buddy. You've got so many people who I know who are going to listen to this episode and be inspired by you and all of your, tactical approaches to life in general, building habits, fitness, being able to be somebody who challenges themselves to do new things. Your masculine perspective as well as super refreshing, because I feel like we need more of it in today's world. And I just want to say thanks, man, for hopping on the show. I really appreciate today's conversation.
Well, I appreciate you, brother. Keep doing what you're doing, man. This is incredible. Like I said, it's been inspiring since I've known you, and now that you're just like projecting this out using your platform, it's incredible. So thanks for having me on. Thanks for thinking of me to even tell my story and us to chat. I mean, it's always a good excuse just to see your face and chat a little.
I completely agree, man. This has been an absolute blessing. And everybody who tuned in today, thanks once again for tuning into the Hart Hustle Podcast. This has been my brother, Hunter Warner, who has been an inspiration for me, and I'm sure he's an inspiration for you guys as well. That's been another episode. Thank you, guys.